Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of It's Your Mind, so give it a minute. I'm James M. Vera, and today's show was supposed to be about the fear of flying. We thought we'd change the topic because of what's going on and help everyone shift their thinking to relax a little bit more. So today on the show, we have Howard Cooper from the UK from rapidchange.works, and he's gonna show us how we can change our thinking rapidly and make permanent lasting change, because he doesn't believe that permanent and lasting change takes a very long time. So go ahead, Odi, run the intro, and I'll meet you all inside. I had to go outside for a few minutes just to kind of break up the monotony of being in all the time. As a matter of fact, I'm wondering what you're doing during the COVID lock-in period if you're not having to go to work. What are you doing during this lock-in time to keep your sanity? Go ahead and put the comments below. So I have a very special guest today, Howard Cooper from rapidchange.works. Howard also has a podcast, rapidchange.works/podcast. He's awesome. He's going to show us some techniques of how we can take back control of our own mind, our own thoughts, our own feelings. This is the first episode of It's Your Mind, so give it a minute. And basically the episodes are going to be interviews with mind experts to teach you how to take back control of your own mind so you can change your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own behaviors, and achieve the goals and things that you want to achieve. So please go ahead and click subscribe now, and go ahead and click like so I can keep these episodes coming. Odi, go ahead and roll that interview now. Here we are. Howard Cooper bills himself as a rapid change consultant, helping people to create rapid shifts in their thinking, rejecting, of course, the notion that deep and lasting change needs to take a long time. Howard has supported more than 2,500 individuals over the past 17 years on an international level. People from all walks of life and ages to overcome all of their intrusive personal phobias, anxieties, and issues that they often have suffered from for years at times. So he is the creator and host of Rapid Change Matters podcast. He was the lead psychological presenter on Virgin Atlantic's critically acclaimed Flying Without Fear course. He's also appeared on Channel 4's documentary Fear of Flying Caught on Camera. He is often on LBC, which is one of the UK's most popular radio stations. His work has also been discussed on the BBC, in the Daily Telegraph, Daily Express, The Sun, and the CEO magazine. In addition, he supports therapists and other change workers who are keen to get great results. He regularly hosts trainings with other leading professionals in the field. He has online training solutions where people can actually learn these skills too. To find Howard, you can find him at www.rapidchange.works. The links will be listed below so you can look him up. His podcast, which is absolutely incredible, is at www.rapidchange.works/podcast. And his training, which I've personally taken myself, is at rapidchange.works/training. It is with unbelievable great honor that I introduce one of my dearest colleagues and friends, Mr. Howard Cooper. Welcome to the show, Howard.
Thank you, James. It's an absolute privilege to be here and an honor to be, going first.
This is the first. It's the first episode.
I feel honored. I see, it's get me out there, and then build up the listeners. And then when really good people come on, then there'll be, then you'll have more listeners to listen to them. Maybe I'll come back.
Yeah, actually, I'm hoping you will come back because, as you know, our original intention for this first episode, I'm going to be talking to Howard about how you can change your thinking and change your mind to get through some of these things that we're all going through with the COVID-19. The episode of this program, the first episode, was supposed to be Fear of Flying because, as I read in the introduction, Howard has a lot of experience with Virgin Atlantic Airlines and all these other places that he's appeared on about fear of flying. And so that's what we were going to do, was fear of flying. But up came a pandemic, and we thought that people could benefit a little better about fear of disease. And who better to do that but Howard? So Howard, during this COVID-19 pandemic, how do you think that we can deal with our fears and our phobias using hypnosis and maybe some other techniques?
It's a really good question, James, and it's one that we need to unpack a little bit. My first inclination when all of this kind of kicked off and people became more and more aware of certainly how serious it seemed to be. We were watching Wuhan, and it began to grow in China, and then it's sort of Iran and various places over in Europe. And I'm in England at the moment. Italy, we've seen a huge explosion, and we're inundated with all sorts of stuff over the media and social media, showing us terrible footage and hearing death numbers and the number of people infected and so on, various places in lockdown. And the term corona anxiety, I'm seeing all over the place. So I'm seeing huge swathes of people online saying, I'm really anxious at the moment. I'm really worried about all of this stuff. And I partly thought to myself, well, how will this affect the world of hypnosis and the world of change workers and people whose job it is to help people day in, day out with anxieties? And I wondered whether we were going to see a large influx of people, just hordes and hordes of people going, quick, can you help me? And that really hasn't been the case. And I was mulling over the reason why. And I think the reason why, and this is just my theory, shines some light on something that's kind of going on and some of the illusions that people are falling for, which is typically people will come to see me, let's say, with a fear of flying, as we talked about. And if we look at fear of flying, it's one of those areas where people go, I know consciously this is irrational. I know statistically speaking, flying is the safest form of transport, but I'm still feeling anxious. Or people that are afraid of dogs, you know, they'll go, well, you know I'm bigger than the dog. I know realistically the chances of it hurting me is not great. So there tends to be this category of people coming and seeking help from change workers when they kind of feel like it deep down, it's irrational. But the thing about this corona anxiety is if you ask people, well, do you want me to help you with some of this? They go, well, no, this one's a real one. This one's really happening. It's really going on right now. So it strikes me that people are kind of almost less willing to let go of the anxiety around it because they seem, they think of it as, well, this is a real threat and this is absolutely happening. And I'm not going to say that it's not serious, and I'm not going to say that there aren't ramifications potentially that are likely in terms of economically and in terms of certainly the people who it infects, whilst 80% of those people will have mild symptoms. And, you know, only currently, I think the rate is about 3.5% of people will die, even if they're infected. Obviously, to those people, it's very, very serious and there are ramifications, but that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the mindset of fear-mongering that's happening, where people are kind of inundated with a whole narrative about what it means. And because they then tell themselves, well, this is really happening, there's this feeling that I can't let go of it because the anxiety somehow serves me.
I just really wanted to ask, do you think that the attachment to the anxiety gives you a feeling that you're being more cautious or more safe? Because if you didn't focus on it so much, you may get it, or because you didn't care.
I think this is absolutely the heart of the issue, which is people have this idea that anxiety itself serves a function. Anxiety keeps you safe or protects you somehow. Well, I would dispute that. In the sense of, I mean, look, if we go to the old metaphor of the deer in the headlights who freezes in the road and gets splatted because he doesn't move out the way, the fear was not really serving him, you know. And if we look at the mechanisms of how we learn, you know, children learn to cross the road when we're little through fear. So we say, if you don't run out into the, don't run out into the road, otherwise you'll get splatted. So we learn to navigate through fear. Why? Because we don't have the innate understanding of how the world works at that time, or the ability to use wisdom to cross the road. So that's what our parents teach us. But how many times do you cross the road and do you look outside and see adults having panic attacks about crossing the road or deep anxiety? No, at some point they learn to upgrade their thinking. They go, well, hey, guess what? If I look left and I look right and I wait till it's clear, i.e. I use wisdom, I don't really need to have anxiety in order to cross safely. In fact, anxiety would get in the way of my clear thinking. Anxiety would get in the way of me being able to use wisdom. So I was on a national radio show a couple of weeks ago talking about corona anxiety and how we manage our anxiety. And it was funny, the host at the time, at the end of the interview, it was like one of these stumbling Columbo type questions. He went, can I ask you, Howard, how many times have you washed your hands today? As though he would somehow catch me out. And I said, well, an appropriate amount of times. But here's the difference. I can take the appropriate precautions of washing my hands and blowing my nose and, taking the dirty dish and putting it in the bin and staying an appropriate distance from people. And I can do all that without having an intense feeling of anxiety.
Right.
Not having anxiety doesn't mean I don't take precautions. It just means I can take the precautions from a state of calm and clear-headedness. And I think that's what people need more of. How do we give people a sense? And that's really where I'm always pointing to. It's this idea that I need the anxiety to stay safe. No. What would be much better is having a sense of clear-headedness. People going and panic buying toilet rolls, it is not a state of clear-headedness. My favorite thing I saw online today was a guy who had worked out the maths. You may have seen it, the math on how much toilet roll you need. So he worked out that if you go to Costco and you buy one of these multi-packs in bulk to supposedly
they don't have anymore.
They don't have anymore, yeah. But he said he observed someone buying 4 of these multi-packs for a 14-day quarantine. He said even if you have a family of 4 and you literally work on average at 20 sheets per number 2, right, to wipe your ass, then guess what? You'd have to have an average as a family of 4 of 185 bowel movements a day in order to get through 14 days, worth of that supply. It's ridiculous.
What's interesting is in the news over here in Los Angeles, people are flushing their toilets and flushing all kinds of stuff down their toilets for whatever God unknown reason, including all this toilet tissue. That the sewers are actually backing up into the streets. Some of it is because people are home doing more laundry and flushing their toilets more, but people need to be conscious that they're going to break down the system with their own panic and fear, giving them more things to be afraid of.
Absolutely. And this is the issue, that what we see actually is the patterns that go on within an individual also then tend to get mirrored at a macro. It's like a microcosm of what's happening at a global scale. So guess what? If people focus very intently on danger and the perception of danger, their body's more likely to respond to feelings of danger and threat. But guess what? If the world at large, i.e. the individuals in that world, start putting out more stuff about panic and threat and danger, then people as a world start responding the same way. And then we create the very issues we're trying to stay away from. This is happening in the same way at a microscopic level with people, individuals.
Yes.
Same mechanisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to that point, I was just talking to someone the other day trying to make the point that during World War II, my mother often talked to me about rations that they had because they were trying to make sure that the troops had enough food, and the troops, everything was about the troops first. She had a sugar certificate that her mother had given her. She was a very little girl. She had a sugar certificate to walk around the corner to buy some sugar for her mother. And by the time she had gotten around the corner, she had lost the sugar certificate. And so they weren't going to have sugar for a month. So her uncle was kind enough to get her out of hot water, and he gave her his sugar certificate, and she was able to get the sugar. But the point to all of this is that the more we look to that era, they showed movies about people working together, like with the sugar certificates, their loved ones writing each other letters, waiting to come home. Most of the movies were geared towards, love stories and patriotism and all of these things. And we've somehow gotten ourselves into this reality TV show competition of who can be meaner to who. And as a result, I believe that's also showing on a macro level, because that's what you're feeding people. And I think what we need to change the movies around, instead of all these killings and everything else. I mean, everything doesn't need to be Pollyanna pure, but it would be nice to start mixing in people helping people, not worrying about which party they belong to, and just all of us diving in together because I believe the world is resetting its clock. I mean, people aren't flying anymore. People are having to stay home and actually interact with one another if they were to start putting more of that positive stuff in the media.
I agree. And you're right. The world, it seems like we're involved in some weird toilet paper version of the Hunger Games.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it doesn't need to be that way.
No, as a matter of fact, I do practice some holistic stuff for myself to stay healthy. And I came across a recipe for this elderberry syrup that's good for the immune system that you can make with freeze-dried elderberries. The other day in my running around...
Recipe in the link below?
Actually, I will put that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know what, Howard? You think of everything. So I'll put that recipe for the elderberry syrup in the link below, because I went to buy elderberries, which is the story, and the guy had 2 bags set aside for me, and he said, these are all sold out. I'm just holding these for you. And I looked at the size of the bag, and it was a very big bag of elderberries. And I thought to myself, do I really need 2 bags? I mean, how much of this syrup am I going to make? I'm not manufacturing it. So I looked at him and I said, you know what? I think I'm only going to take the 1 bag. I said, because I think at this point we should only take what we think we need. And he looked at me like I was a Martian from another planet. He goes, I haven't heard anybody talk like that.
Yeah.
So I think we need to get that mindset really do you really need 3, 4, 5 things? As a matter of fact, I bought a big thing of toilet paper, and they were $20 American, and I had 2 of them in my cart, Charmin. And as I got through the store, I actually felt guilty, and I put 1 back. Now I kind of am wondering, am I ever going to see toilet paper again? But nonetheless, I thought to myself, don't be greedy. You don't need 2 big things of toilet paper. You're all right with 1. So, I mean, I think we just have to be a little bit more reasonable.
We do, but I think here's the issue. Some people will really struggle with that idea, because what they're doing is they are operating from a place of primal fear and primal threat. There's a bunch of thinking that's going on that's creating that panic response. And there's some illusions at play. Now, I know we've spoken about this before, but I'd like to share a story that actually I took from, I was first exposed to this story from Jürgen Rasmussen, who teaches the psychological illusion model of change and hypnosis. And I'm going to regale people with it, if that's okay, which is the Lumiere brothers were 2 French guys who created cinema. And back in 1896, one of the first pieces of footage they ever created was a 90-second movie of a train coming into a station. So there's no storyline, there's no plot, there's just a train coming into a station. You or I, James, we'd be able to watch that. And never mind feeling anxious or feeling calm, we'd probably feel a little bored. I mean, it was just no plot. I mean, what is this? But of course, if we go back in time to 1896 and look at the very first showing of it, the people of France are led into this tiny little room. They have no idea what they're about to see. And suddenly the lights go down. And suddenly they see a train coming towards them. And as they see that, their heart starts racing. Some of them duck so they won't get run over. Some of them even run out the cinema screaming for their lives. There's a train. Now, if we asked them and we said to them, listen, dude, is that real anxiety that you're feeling? Chances are they look at us almost as though we were nuts and go, what do you mean, is that real anxiety? Of course I'm anxious. Of course I'm really anxious. Look, my hands are shaking. My heart's really pounding. I'm really in a state of panic. But if we said to them, well, what are you panicking about? Or where's the fear coming from? They'd likely look at us and again, like we were nuts and go, what do you mean, why am I anxious? There's a train coming towards me. The train is making me anxious. Now, here's the thing. You and I, we would know that it couldn't possibly be a train making them anxious.
Exactly.
Because it's not really a train. It's just an image that they were seeing. But the illusion is that they would think, I mean, how would they respond if we said to them, if we tried to help them? And if we turn around to them and said, dude, it's not real, what do you think they would likely respond? That's a question I often think to myself. How would they respond if we just said to them, dude, it's not real? Wouldn't they likely turn around and go, what do you mean it's not real? Of course it's real. And the reason why they would say it was real is because they would be looking at the intense feeling of anxiety they would take as proof that it's real. They would think that the feeling of anxiety meant that the train was real. But it wouldn't mean that. The only thing the feeling of anxiety would really be telling them was how much are they believing that the image is really happening. They haven't even know that it's an image. They've totally bought into it.
Bought into the
doesn't
illusion.
Mean it.
Bought into the illusion.
Absolutely, correct. So that's the thing. People really believe that the feeling that they have of anxiety is really proof that there's a threat. If I'm feeling this anxious, it must be real, but it doesn't. The only thing the feeling tells us is how absorbed are we in our own narrative. So if people have been seeing lots of narratives around, guess what? The world, we're having Coronageddon. There's an economic crisis.
Coronageddon.
I've
you
been
just
using that.
you just keep coming up with them.
There you go. People are thinking, the world's ending. We've got Corona getting upon us. I'm using it again. We've got this happening and that happening, and economic decline, and I'll be out of work forever. And come September, it's still going to be like this. I'm going to be locked in. They'll have to airlift food to me. And they've got all of these thoughts. The feeling of anxiety that they have and the need to panic buy is not coming from what's actually happening. It's coming from them getting very absorbed into the narrative. And I know some people might be sitting there going, yeah, but those things could happen. And I would say, yeah, they could. And also they might not. But whether they do or they don't is not dependent on how strongly we feel it.
And your anxiety is not going to prevent it from happening.
Correct. The anxiety is totally separate. It's a little bit like, there's an old-fashioned phrase, which is even a stopped clock is right twice a day. But it doesn't mean if the clock said 2:40 and that's what it's stuck at, when it gets to 2:40 in time and space, if you look over at the clock, it doesn't mean that the clock's telling the time. It just means to happen that, and our feelings are a little bit like the clock. Like it might happen. There might be some terrible things that occur and so on. But if they do, it's not because our feelings told us that. Right. Our feelings were totally independent. And I was chatting with Jürgen Rasmussen only a few days ago about this. And he said something funny to me. He said, people think these feelings tell us about the world, but think back to November 2019 or December 2019, where everyone was going, 2019 is just awful. We've had all sorts of chaos. And in England, we've had Brexit and uncertainty. And didn't everyone have a real feeling inside of positivity about 2020? A feeling of hope and vibrancy. 2020 is going to be amazing.
We're going to make a change.
How accurate were those feelings about what's actually happened? Not at all.
Right.
Like the feeling of this is going to be great didn't occur. So what makes us think that the feeling of doom and gloom is also accurate? It's not. It's just as inaccurate.
I can interject in this, and I don't mind sharing with the viewers that I think it was probably over a year ago. Howard and I had created a friendship, and I was on a podcast episode of his on the Rapid Change Works podcast. That's how we met. After that podcast, it took a lot for me, but I called you, and I was very emotional, and I said, I have something to share with you, and it was my own fears of dying. I'm a hypnotist. I help people with this stuff all the time. I was embarrassed because I had it. Even though I could help all of my clients, and all the self-hypnosis that I was doing with myself for whatever reason was not making the shift. You, in fact, did, I believe, some of that technique that Rasmussen teaches, and Jorgensen. Lo and behold, I think I had written you a letter afterwards and said, what did you do? Because even as a professional, I didn't realize what had happened to me during the process that we worked through together. And I just want to commend you, because I do not think, and I know we were joking earlier before the recording started about you taking full credit, but in all honesty, you do need to take full credit, and so does Jorgensen for the process, because I do not think that I would be handling it, and I cannot say that I am not afraid. I work in the medical industry. I do not really want to go to the hospital very often. I mean, I totally get fear. It's not like I have no fear. The fear is not crippling me like it would have prior to us working together. And I truly believe that. I mean, am I afraid? Am I concerned? Absolutely. I have been concerned since it broke out in China, because I work with a lot of Yale doctors, a lot of Yale medical professionals, and they were saying completely different what was being fed to the American public by our political and our media system over here about not taking it too seriously and comparing it to the flu and making all these other judgments. But the medical professionals that are on the front lines, the ones of us that are in the hospitals working, are the ones that are seeing exactly how this can affect the big structure. So thank you, basically, because who knew a pandemic was coming, but thank God we worked together.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And
your techniques work very well. Absolutely.
Thank you. It's okay for people to have concerns and be able to look at the things that are coming up and prepare and take action accordingly. But do we have to do that with a sort of crippling primal response of that I see a lot of people doing?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, we don't have to. But of course, if someone had some sort of thought like, I must never now have any panic or any fear or any anxiety ever again, that's also not a helpful mindset to have. It's like fear of flying, and I know we're not focusing on that.
Oh, you can talk
today,
about
but I have people, and they'll say, make me like all the phobic the people who fly okay, who love flying all the time, who love it, and I'm like, dude, let's get real here. If I said to you, you were going to go on an 8-hour coach journey tomorrow, how would you feel? They'd be like, oh. Like, exactly. You're not going to be leaping for joy, going, yeah, great, 8 hours stuck in a coach, going somewhere. Well, exactly. But would you feel anxious? No, you might feel a bit bored, or you might not be looking forward to it. And so you might take action, like bring some books and get ready. Like, there's a difference between enjoying something every moment of it and just having a normal, healthy relationship with it. It's okay to have some feelings of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to have some feelings of what on earth is going on, or this is new, or what challenges do I need to wake up and deal with today? How am I going to figure this out? And I've got a wife and 2 young kids, and I suddenly find myself in the position from next week we're having to, homeschool them. I don't yet know how this is going to manifest and work itself out. How do I manage to run my business? And my wife has a full-time job and she has to work from home, and all the while be homeschooling a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old who, quite frankly, are not at the age where they like to go off and do their own thing. They like mummy and daddy. I'm surprised she hasn't even come in yet through the door and sort of sat on my knee during this interview.
We will welcome her to the show. I just need a way to introduce
it could happen. Yeah, it could happen. So my wife and I are going to sit down and work out a timetable and have a conversation about how do we do that. But can I do those things without falling for the illusory thoughts and the narrative of, oh my God, everything's going to go terribly and I'm going to be sucked into this and it's going to be like this for the next 13 years. And how will we cope?
Because in fact, if that's what you think, then that just may be what comes. That it's going to be terrible, that it's going to be hard. I mean, you can make it so much easier by thinking of that this can work. This is going to be a little difficult, but we can make this work.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Challenge
me, Howard.
Yeah, well, what I would say is there is this idea that, of course, positive thinking and focusing on good stuff, can be useful and can help. And I would say that there are benefits to it. The danger with that is that then sometimes people can become afraid of their own negative thoughts.
Oh, I see.
And if they become afraid of their own negative thoughts, then what happens is they begin, or sometimes it can be like they begin to pop up more often. So I often use this example with people that if my son comes into my bedroom one night and says, Daddy, 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 there's a monster under my bed, how reassuring would it be if I said, George, there's no monster, but whatever you do, don't look it in the eye. That would freak him out. He would be like, what? So there really is a monster? What do I do? This is really terrifying. Essentially, if a negative thought pops up and people begin to have a relationship with it where they're like, oh, I mustn't have that negative thought because the thought itself poses a threat to me. It creates this unhelpful phenomena where it marks the thought itself out as significant. And guess what? The brain's more likely to pull it up more often because it's been marked out as a threat to you. The brain is designed to move away from threat. So if there's a threat, well, it's going to keep popping up. It's the difference between, imagine being in a room with a ticking clock. And at first you walk into the room and you're like, dude, this ticking clock, how can I do anything? It's driving me mad, this constant. It's distracting me. How can I? And then suddenly 2 hours later, you suddenly realize, oh, I wasn't listening to it. And the moment you realize you were doing something else, you got totally absorbed in something else.
Indeed.
Then you notice it again. But for 2 hours, you had like zero attention on it because the brain can filter it out because deep down, the clock, poses no threat to you. But I defy anyone to sit in a room with a tiger that's hungry and get on with something else. The brain's not going to filter it out because the brain knows deep down, yeah, that tiger's a threat.
Right.
But what if you realize and you looked and realized, hold on a second, it's just a picture of a tiger. It's just a picture of a tiger. Then you would be able to focus on other stuff. It wouldn't have the same weight to it. And that's really the thing, that people are becoming very absorbed into their narrative that they have in their mind, labeled corona and labeled terrible things happening. And if we tell ourselves, well, I mustn't think those things in order to protect myself, well, now it's marked out as significant. It's harder to get on with other stuff. But if we say to ourselves, hang on a second, let me have a look at this, what I'm actually seeing. Hang on. The image of me in my head is not actually me. It's just a movie screen in my mind. It's just a projector. Do I even have to get rid of it in order to stay safe? And if anyone's watching this, sorry, I don't mean to sound that as though like you'll have no listeners.
Howard.
What? Let me rephrase. I would like the millions
On the
of people
first
who are listening
episode,
to
if
this.
anyone's
I know.
watching
I would like millions of people who are listening to this at this very moment to try and experiment, to close their eyes and imagine winning the lottery, and imagine winning all 6 numbers, and imagine that the millions of dollars or the millions of pounds that you've just won and all the things you'll do with it. And isn't that great? And get really absorbed into that. Fantastic, wonderful. Oh, and you could take some time to really do that. But if I said, open your eyes and come back out and tell me, are you now statistically more likely to win the lottery? Oh, well, no, not really. The thinking about it didn't really change anything. But what if you really got it so involved into it that you began to resonate with a feeling of total certainty? What if you got so into it that you really began to enjoy that? Would now you be more likely to win the lottery? Again, no. What if you did it 30 times a day for 30 years? Now, statistically, is the machine like to spit out those numbers more readily? No. You're thinking you might enjoy it. You might get a good feeling from it, but it doesn't change what's actually happening.
I see.
The same thing is here. You could imagine terrible scenarios, economic things unfolding, corona. You could imagine dying horribly from corona. But it still wouldn't change the likelihood of what's happened. Doesn't mean nothing will ever happen to you bad. It just means that the feeling that you're getting doesn't tell you whether it will happen. That's a crucial distinction.
That's really great, because there's so much about positive thinking, positive affirmations. And I don't want to put that down, because I'll tell you, that has really gotten me out of some things in my life by turning my own thinking around. I see it in the hospital. I believe, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit coming up, that for example, patients who have a good attitude about healing and getting better seem to get better. And people that are, can you hand me that Kleenex box? They just seem to malinger. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to move towards what people can do at home, or what you teach your clients to do outside of an office setting to help them with all of this overwhelming fear and worry.
There's a bunch of stuff that can be done and that people can do. But I think one of the things that I really like doing, and I'm sorry to harp on about it, is to help people see the distinction between the images in that they're making in their head and the reality. So one very easy strategy that I give people to do, well let's try this. Give me an example of one thing that people typically seem to be worrying about at the moment in relation to corona.
Not being able to take care of their families because they're too sick.
Okay, great one. So James, close your eyes for a second and just have the thought, I can't take care of my family because either I'm too sick or they're sick and they need me. Really have that thought. Really just sit with it. And just notice, as you have that thought, there may likely be a response. Might feel a certain way. Just notice that. And now what I'd like you to do is almost imagine kind of stepping out that thought so that you see it more clearly as a thought. If it helps to put a border around it, do that. But in your mind now, I want you to say to yourself something that's similar, that's slightly different, which is, I'm observing a thought. I'm worrying about not being able to provide the help for my family. I'm observing a thought. I can't take care of my family. And what's the difference as you step out of it and say to yourself, no, I'm experiencing the thought I can't take care of my family. Does that feel somehow different from?
Yes, much. There was definitely a shift. I went from feeling all this angst in my chest and in my stomach to, you know what? It's just a thought.
So one thing I get people to do is to practice that idea of like, if there's something that's bothering them, just being able to rephrase it instead of like, I'm anxious about dying. That's very different from I'm experiencing the thought I'm anxious about dying.
Right.
It has it helps nudge you towards seeing that it's just a transient
It's
experience
just, it's
that's coming
just
up
the
in
train.
awareness.
It's just the train coming at us from the screen.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
And the reality is once you begin to see that it's all just the train, you don't need to run out the cinema in order to stay safe. In just the same way that if you're channel hopping and you see a serial killer film and the serial killer is coming towards the screen with a knife, how many people have to change the channel in order not to get stabbed?
It sounds kind of silly, doesn't it? When you put it that way, you know?
But again, it doesn't mean that there's no one in the world that will ever have an intruder who will kill them.
Right. So with this new COVID-19, I guess medical professionals and doctors in this country anyways are finally being given permission to see people through telehealth or televideo, often like we're having this chat right now. When this started a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact, as of last Saturday, I finished out any clients that I had in my office face-to-face. Now, I've been seeing clients all over the world, as you have been, nationwide and worldwide, using these techniques over televideo or telehealth or telehypnosis, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately, some of the clients that were scheduled to come and see me face to face were very, very disappointed that I was offering to them to switch it to this type of situation, the televideo. I explained to them that I was just working in Colombia, South America, and Arizona here in the United States, and test taking anxiety, and a boxer down in Colombia, all these different people, and that it's extremely effective. It's as effective as it is in the office. I was also explaining to them that they'd get a recording because I would record the Zoom and they would be able to listen to the audio for reinforcement, which is always great.
Yeah.
And even with that, many of them doubted that this type of situation could work for hypnosis. I guess my question to you is, do you think that the clients can get the same benefits that they get from doing hypnosis live with doing it with you or me or anyone else online on a video?
It's a really good question. And as you know, I've worked with people all around the world over Skype and online and Zoom and all the various different ways in which you can do it. And it is an unbelievably cool way to work with people. The idea that I can be sitting in England, in the UK, helping someone in Australia on the other side of the world with these skills is just phenomenal. I also have had a few people who say to me things like, no, I prefer to see you face to face. I understand that. That might be their preference. But I think the point is that we really need to find ways, you, I, and the other change workers and the other therapists and the health professionals that are out there, of really helping people understand that this is an incredibly powerful way of working with people. And it really can be just as effective.
Absolutely.
And the reason why is that, what am I actually going to do with someone in the room? I'm going to talk with them. I have a responsibility to bring 100% of my expertise and my skill set and all the things that I know to that session in a face-to-face environment. And the other person has a 100% responsibility to be engaged and to be responsive. If someone thinks that it's more effective face-to-face, then probably they have some strange ideas about what we're going to do. I.e. that, that this is something that I'm going to do to them. That it's like administering an injection. Yeah, that it's like they just have to sit back and be passive. But the reality is if someone really understands that their role is to be engaged and to be collaborative, which means that the change is happening in their head. Guess what? Their head is with them all the time. Even if I'm not there, they're still there with their head. And it's the same head they'd have if they were face to face with me.
One of the things I tell them is oftentimes is that you'll be oftentimes they're more relaxed because they're in their own environment, because they're not in a strange place. They are going to see the strange guy, be in a room alone with them. I mean, all those things that sometimes go through people's minds, it's all alleviated because you're right there in your own home or your own office space or wherever it is that you're doing it. And what I tell people is it's voice to mind. So whether you're listening to a pre-recorded version of hypnosis, whether you're doing it live with a hypnotist, it's pretty much voice to mind. It goes to your unconscious, regardless of which way the words sink in.
I think, what we're pointing at is that I think that some people may have some ideas that, well, is it as effective? And sometimes I'll align with them and say, well, listen, I know it may seem like it possibly couldn't be as effective. I get that, because sometimes when you're sitting and you've got distractions, you're at home, there's various bits and pieces, but you know what? If I commit to giving you 100%, be totally with you, and you commit to being 100% engaged with the process, whether that's face to face or online, then there's no need for there to be any difference in the results. In fact, from the comfort of your home, it can be just as easy and just as effective.
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, and
I believe I am.
His book called The Biology of Belief. He talks a lot about mind and body, and how our cells and even our DNA, he talks about, can be reprogrammed with the mind. Just kind of talk about a little bit, if you could, and explain how you feel that the mind and the body are connected, and why a client can take control over both systems.
I don't believe they are connected.
You do not?
No, I
Okay.
fundamentally don't believe they are connected.
Okay, explain.
I believe they're actually one and the same thing. They're not even, like, implying they're connected implies you've got a mind, and then separate you have body, and somehow they're linked. But no, there's just mind body. It's all one thing, which is
Very fascinating.
I don't believe that there's
which is why one works with the other.
Yeah, or they just work together. Like, they're all just working. It's not even one works with the other, or they work together. They're just...
It's the synchronicity of the whole system.
Yeah, it's like, for me, the question's a little bit like saying, so there's some research that says that your left arm and your right arm are connected. Could you explain more about how they're connected? Well, they're just part of me. They're part of the system.
Indeed.
They don't really work together. They just work.
Hmm.
So this is why that, you can imagine, I often use the example to the uninitiated of, when I get asked the question, what is hypnosis? I often use the example of, have you ever had the experience where someone takes a blackboard and then they take their fingernails and they reach across and they kind of do that horrible, like...
I actually just got goosebumps.
Well, there you go. And I'll say to people, you probably had a squirmy feeling inside, a goosebumpy feeling. People go, yeah, I did. And I go, well, where did the goosebumps or the squirmy feeling come from? And they'll go, the blackboard. I'm like, dude, there was no blackboard. And there was no noise. All that happened was you got so absorbed in the imagination of it that your body began to respond as though it were real. For me, that's hypnosis. Very simple. And, we just did that via Skype.
Yes,
online, and the goosebumps were just as real as if you were in my office.
Right.
Because the illusion was going on in your mind, not in my office. So I'll often give that to people as an example as well. But that also shows how the mind-body system is just playing together.
Right.
Mind-body system, it's all one thing.
Wow. See? Even I learned something in the interview. That's awesome. Is there anything else that you wanted to add that maybe I didn't ask you?
Great question.
I wonder where I learned that.
Great question. Do you know what? The only thing that comes to mind, and it's a shout out to anyone who's watching this, of the millions that are tuning in right now.
Yeah, and you're supposed to tell them, and you're also supposed to mention, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit like. Like is very important, because when the airlines are working again, they might just get to tune into an episode of you talking about the fear of flying.
So I certainly won't forget I may forget to actually give people all my links to rapidchange.works and to rapidchange.works/training, where they can get really great information and so on. But joking aside, not that that's a joke, do check it out. It's very important. I think we have a responsibility as people working in the field of change to do what we can to use our expertise to help people at large keep a little bit more perspective and stay a little bit more clear thinking and calm and measured during these uncertain times. And part of that starts with us really being able to see through the illusions of our own thinking. So one of the things I often say to therapists, if I'm helping them or working with them, is, you know what, if we go back to the idea of my son coming into my bedroom and saying, Daddy, there's a monster under my bed, how effectively do you think I as a parent could help him if I also believed there was a monster under the bed? Probably not very effectively.
Right.
So it really starts with me seeing through my own illusions. So if I know there's no monster under the bed, and I really deeply get that, I'm probably much more able to help him see that there's no monsters under the bed. So if people are out there working as change workers going, there's going to be economic disaster and we're all going to freak out, and their state is not right and they haven't seen through where all this is going, then before you work with other people, I would say probably best to do some work with yourself.
Get yourself in order.
And help see you. Yeah.
Yeah, and not to use an airline analogy, but sort of like when they tell you when the masks drop down, please put it on your face first. It never made any sense to me, but now it totally makes sense, because if you can't help yourself, you can't help your child or anyone else. So catch your breath first, and then you can be more available for other people. As a matter of fact, with working with my own clients, when they come in with the fear of death now or the fear of disease, I do so much better working with those clients now because I'm not experiencing that. Oh, I wanted to show you something. This is my
cool.
This is my sweatshirt that I got from redbubble.com. Oh, let me move this. So this was done by an independent artist named Brianna. She's on Instagram at Not a Damn Cheese on Instagram. But the cool thing about redbubble.com, and I love the title of this, by the way, because it's appropriate for what we're talking about today, which is When Life Hands You Lemons. You're going to make lemonade, and that's certainly what most of us are going to do. But I got that off of redbubble.com, which, again, you can find the link below to get your own version of this beautiful shirt. But what's cool about redbubble.com and all the independent artists that work for them is that they support the independent artists. They're ethically sourced, and for the environment, they only print a shirt as it's ordered. They silk screen them as they're ordered, so they don't print up a whole bunch of shirts ahead of time. And they they follow the Fair Labor Association's practices. Redbubble.com. The link is below. The shirt is below. Brianna's awesome. Howard Cooper, nobody's more awesome than you and the work that you do. And you did help me from 3,000 miles away, and for that, I will be ever grateful. I look forward to seeing you more on these episodes, and I look forward to rejoining you on your podcast as well, as we all work through helping people to get over their fears and phobias, and that even change workers have issues with their own fears and phobias. So until next time, Howard, thank you so much. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. Keep the shiny side up.
Absolute pleasure.
Until next time. We'll see each other again soon. Bye-bye now.
All the best, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Really, really great interview. Thank you so much, Howard Cooper. I can't thank you enough for being the very first guest on It's Your Mind. So give it a minute. As I said before, Howard can be reached at rapidchange.works. I'm James M. Vera, and I can be reached at onlinehypnosisnow.com. I've been doing hypnosis online for almost 10 years now, all across the globe. It is extremely effective, as we talked about in the interview with Howard. I'd also like to thank my YouTube producer. Without him, this wouldn't even be possible. So thank you, Odi Martinez Jr. from ASK Entertainment and Media. I look forward to working with you again, and a special thanks, of course, to all my friends at Keyword Performance. Remember, it's your mind, so give it a minute. Keep the shiny side up. Until next time, I'm James M. Vera.